and what.
Whatever it is, it's not right on the teleprompter. I don't know what that is. I've never seen that. I can't read it. There's no words on it. I can't do it. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. Do it live.
Welcome to the podcast with your moderator, Alexei Pavlov, co-host Michael Penn, and co-host Grace Pavlov. Today, our topic of discussion is going to be toxic productivity. But with that being said, first, let's just kind of go over some of the events that have transpired just in this past week for us. Grace, what has been a highlight of your past week?
I got sent home from work early. That was really nice.
Where do you work at?
Well, I mean, this can wait when we talk about because that's the only job I really have. But I work at a pizza place.
You work at a pizza place in
Belfast.
In Belfast.
So what do you do at this pizza place? I worked at a pizza place once.
Okay, so it's called Belfast Woodfire Pizza. No shameless promo right here, but it is the best pizza in Belfast. It is made by the hands of a true Italian, Italiano. And he hand makes the dough, hand makes the sauce, hand makes everything. And it's his own, each pizza is his own personal creation. So if you're ever in Belfast, this is the best pizza. But anyway, what I do is I'm basically like a waitress, server. I'll clean some cups and some silverware. I'll take collection orders on the telephone. It's a very small place, so there's like a lot of things that like you'll just pick up when it's needed, you know? Like even if I'm sectioned on a certain part of the restaurant and there's food that needs to be delivered to the other section, if I'm walking across the service area, I'll just pick up the pizzas and take them to the next table. Yesterday, I was trained on bar. So that was fun. So I made some dark and stormies, made some Cosmos.
Put
some Sprite in a cup.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but can you kind of explain to us because I'm sure in the United States, I don't know if you would be able to serve drinks per se, right? Or I think you have to be 18 to serve alcohol, at least in New York State.
Oh, well, Alec, the drinking age here is 21. So, or no, the drinking age here is not 21, it's 18. So me being 19, about to be 20 this next week, actually in a week from today, or a week from yesterday, actually, it's no problem.
Okay. So you're able to mess with all things alcohol and not really, I mean, is there any
yeah, I get a free pint after work, you know.
Nice. There you go. Michael, what was your highlight of last week?
So my classes ended in the college that I teach at, which was pretty exciting. Now we just have finals. So we had these presentations for math majors who are working on their final project. And that was pretty exciting. A couple of my students gave good presentations. One was about a mathematical study of voting theory and how the medals for the first sport climbing event in the Olympics were handed out, and how those medals may or may not have changed depending on a different voting tallying method. So that was pretty cool. Now we've just got finals, grading, then winter break, which is nice.
There you go. What was your take on the Olympics this past year with climbing being a sport? I mean, I know you do. I don't know what specific technique or form that you do, but yeah, what was
So the Olympic climbing was broken down into 3 events, but only 1 medal was given. So there are 3 events: speed, lead, and boulder. And your final score is determined by the product of your scores in each individual event. So for instance, if you get second place in speed, third place in boulder, and fourth place in lead, your total score is 2 times 3 times 4, so 24. And then whoever has the lowest score wins. So, I mean, this was like a pretty interesting way to do the calculation. Climbers on the whole were excited about climbing being in the Olympics, but a little bit less than excited about the combined format, given that generally speed climbers, specialized speed climbers, I should say, are not at the top of the game in lead and bouldering. And also lead and boulder climbers are not at the top of the game in speed climbing. So it was like seen as a little bit of an artificial combination. But, you know, the IOC only gave the Sport Climbing Federation 1 medal event per men and per women. So this was like seen as a compromise situation for this Olympics. In Paris 2024, there will be 2 medal events, speed, and then lead and boulder will be combined. I think some people would still find the combination of lead and boulder a little bit problematic, but it's way less problematic. There are like many very good examples of climbers excelling in both lead and the lead and the boulder category. Yeah. So what we found, well, my student, he found that you would actually end up with a different medal situation, like who got gold, silver, and bronze would be different depending on how this total score was tabulated. Was it addition instead of multiplication, or was it like some sort of more obscure, like ranked voting method? So that was pretty interesting, and that kind of shows that it was hard to come up with something that was deemed fair in the first place. The fact that the medals are not really consistent isn't the right word, but stable. There's no stable list of medalists across all different voting methods.
It kind of sounds like, you know, the way in which you're combining all 3 of these events, right? It kind of sounds like track, right? I mean, there's like a couple competitions or a couple medal-based events that, I don't know, like a decathlete or something, right? That would compete in multiple events to, you know, be the best out of those 5, right? So climbing is not track. It's not, you're not able to, I mean, could you see like later maybe having like an overall champion of all 3 of those categories again? But you know what I mean?
So I mean, like other fixes have been put forth. For instance, maybe something like the gymnastic system has been like said to be possible, where each of the 3 is a medal event, and then there's also an overall medal. I don't know. We'll see what happens in the future. It was a really popular Olympic event this year. I guess like it got a lot of total viewers and stuff. So
I was watching.
Good.
I was watching. Yeah.
I mean, climbing's a really interesting sport, and then it can be done competitively and non-competitively, like sort of as a lifetime activity. That makes it kind of nice. But you know, we'll see how it goes in the future.
We'll see. Well, to kind of round out our weeks, my week was pretty jam-packed. Obviously, the winter sports season is in our midst, and I just started covering wrestling, which is awesome. Been to a few tournaments already, taken a lot of good photos, I believe. Highlight, though, would probably be my father coming to visit. He's still here. He's actually going to come to the office at around 2 today. So that'll be nice to have him kind of see where I work. It's been interesting living out here on my own, and I'm sure Grace can kind of attest to this, that, you know, I've become so acclimated to Ohio that it's hard for me to find interesting things to do because I just live here, right? I'm sure that was kind of the same way when we lived in New York. It was like, oh, I can go wherever, whenever day I want. So it's like, I don't really have any urgent things that I wanted to see. But with that being said, I brought my dad to a Friday night basketball game at Fairbanks High School. The Panthers won 41-36, I believe. I wrote a story about it, so I should know this. But it was very interesting because the gym that we were in, he explained to me this. He was like, this gym was this gym made in like the 50s? Because he was like, he's a theater guy, and he was telling me about all of like these, like in Fairbanks, they have a stage in the actual gym, and the stage is used for the student section as well as the band that plays. And he was describing to me like, those are things that were done in the 50s. Those are like construction things that happened in the 50s. And I actually got talking to the AD of Fairbanks local schools, and I asked, was this gym built sometime in the mid 50s? And he was like, actually, it was built in 61. So my dad was kind of close in just by looking at how the gym was set up. So that was kind of interesting as a neat tidbit. But just this past Sunday, we went to my first ever Ohio State wrestling match. Tickets were like $20. We sat on the floor, not on the floor, but we had floor seats. Gotta distinguish those two. And it was really interesting watching, some of the top Division I athletes. Ohio State has like 4 or 5 guys nationally ranked. I think their highest right now is Caleb Romero, who's their 140, 150 something pounder. He's actually from a local school that I kind of interact with sometimes called Mechanicsburg. Mechanicsburg is known for their tough wrestlers and their tough football players, and they have a really good lifting program. So they get some strong kids out of there. That was just kind of a rundown of my last week. It was fun. It was pleasurable, but I also had to work. So I had to work Saturday as well. I had to do another wrestling tournament. So like, don't really have that much time nowadays for anything leisurely, but it was nice to see my father. But that's awesome that, we get to hear what Michael Penn and Grace Pavloff have been doing with their lives as well. Moving forward into our conversation for today, the main topic of discussion is going to be toxic productivity and the downfall of the hustle culture. So welcome to our new episode where we're going to be discussing this. And there's many different facets that we can kind of tackle this issue at. But I wanted to first get everyone's idea of what they would define as toxic productivity. So starting with you, Grace, I mean, you're in college, right? You are going through rigorous studies. You have so much to do. You have a job. So kind of tell us, what is your version? What is your definition of toxic productivity?
In all honesty and seriousness, I think I could benefit from some toxic productivity. So I guess what that means to me is that, I guess it would be toxic in the way that you deprive yourself of social recuperation, of physical nutrition, of hygiene, of just like the very basic ways that you can easily take care of yourself, and depriving yourself of those things. Like, I think part of a balanced lifestyle that includes being productive means that you have to like feed your body the right foods, get a certain amount of exercise, certain amount of sunlight, take certain vitamins if you're in a certain place like Belfast where there's like 5 hours of daylight a day at the moment, and stuff like that. So I think that answers your question, I hope.
So what you're saying is that you want to take less showers?
But no, I get what you're saying. No, I think that for me, there are times where I'm toxically unproductive, and so therefore maybe I could sacrifice a night out or two to spend my night in the library, or maybe sacrifice a good night's sleep for a night in the library, stuff like that. So that's what I'm actually going to do this evening. After this phone call, I'm going to stay up until the sun rises at this very lovely library.
I love it. I used to live that life. That's a lonely journey, but
oh no, all my friends are here.
oh, well then there you go. I was usually by myself because kind of with your token, Grace, one caveat that I think would be interesting to hear from is what's your experience like with burnout? Because it sounds like, you've kind of relaxed a little bit, right? Is that fair to say?
I think I'm a little too relaxed.
You're a little
I think
too
I'm a little
relaxed.
too calm about my circumstances. I definitely should be more anxious than I am.
but before then, did you have like a crunch that you were going through?
Not necessarily, but I witnessed my flatmate going through a crunch. She so our classes or our final exams are done on the 17th, so this Friday. But she left Belfast like 3-4 days ago because she had to have surgery, and so she's in recovery right now. And so she had to have all of her stuff done before.
Right.
So she, like, immediately after our midterms were done, she started working on her final assignments, and that included like 3,000-page papers and like 2 reflection like assignments. And I literally did not see her for like a week. Like she would be up, like our hours just did not cross, and she would just always be in the library.
Does she have a job?
Yes, she also does have a job. And she'd be working like evenings on the weekends and stuff. She was also a waitress. So it's just like I witnessed burnout through her because she was talking to me about her burnout, but I was just.
So you just got influenced by her.
Yeah, it was
I
like
guess secondhand burnout. Oh, wow, I've never heard that before.
Secondhand burnout.
We'll have to coin that term.
I think I'm definitely a very special case. I mean, I'm going to start stressing like tomorrow or like the day after tomorrow about how many words I have to write in the next like 48 hours.
I would be stressed.
And then I'm going to be like, oh, if I don't get it done on time, that's going to be okay. I'll just take the penalty of the late turn in. But that's also just not a good relationship. So, Michael, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, I was about to say, Michael, what's your definition of burnout? But if you have something to say, go for it.
No, I don't have anything to say. I'm just wondering do you think your experience is unique or is your experience standard? Like, are there other students sort of at your stage in university that like hustle to get everything done ahead of time and to do everything kind of extra, and then also have like side projects and so on and so forth where they feel like they can't do enough? Like that's how I would define like toxic productivity, like trying to do so much, but it's never enough.
Yeah.
Or is everyone just sort of like happy with their circumstance? And
I think there definitely is like a universal confirmation that like everybody feels like they have a lot of shit to do and they feel like they have the most shit to do out of everybody else. I'm sorry, I just cursed. Are we allowed to curse?
I mean, we're allowed to now.
I think so.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't. Sorry.
It's okay.
It slipped.
It's okay.
But I like what you said. What was that thing you just said? The way you just phrased that about. Wait, can you repeat what you said?
I mean, let's
Michael?
go back to let's go back to the script. No, I don't know. I don't remember what I said. It was off the cuff. I'm amazing.
Shit.
So I said something about like the need to be like ever more productive, like regardless of how much you're getting done and creating.
Yeah. And I think that lives at different levels of how much you've actually gotten done. Like you can get so much done, really have everything finished, but still feel that way. Or you can be like, oh, there's so much that like, and haven't really gotten anything done and still feel that same way. I guess that's what I meant by that universal, like, uniformity.
Yeah.
Amongst students, I guess. Because you're always going to think that there's more to do. You're always going to think that there's something more you can improve on, you know? And it's just, when do you step back and say, no, this is good enough for now,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from my side of the aisle, right? I agree with what both of you had to say in terms of what toxic productivity is. Obviously I would 110% fall on the notion that that when you do toxic, or when you're doing toxic productivity, you ignore your own body, you ignore your own mind, you do it for the sake of the grind. And especially, I mean, I don't know what circles, Michael, when you were a student, or Grace, I don't know what circles that you kind of go around in, but when I was in school, I was around a lot of entrepreneurs, guys in finance, business administration, that kind of deal, but more so the entrepreneurial aspect of the grind, right? You do it for the sake of the grind. And I think it's important when you have a goal, like before you be productive, you have to have a goal in mind, right? I feel like when I did toxic productivity, I was just doing it because I was doing it out of the need to please others. I didn't really have a goal necessarily in mind for myself. And I feel like that also needs to be taken into consideration. Why are you doing these things? Well, if you find out why, you might be smarter about how you go about it, because you want to do it to the best of your ability. And I think part of what also inhibits toxic productivity is deadlines. I mean, I don't know what your deadline is, Grace, but for like school stuff, and Michael, I'm sure you can kind of talk about this from like an aspect of teachers, or like as a professor rather. But when I was in college, there was no extension. It was deadline is a deadline. If you don't turn it in, it's a 0. So you're turning in something no matter what. And in journalism, nothing's going to be perfect all the time. I think journalists understand that their work is the first draft of history. So I don't think that they're going to be 100% right all the time. But part of my toxic productivity was dealing with deadlines and making sure that I did everything beforehand properly. So that way, when it came down to crunch time, I wasn't hurting myself. You know what I mean? Yeah, go for it.
May I share my point of view, or my experience personally? So when I first came to university last year, flash forward a couple years earlier, before university, I was diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder, and then later on with general anxiety. And I was always a very, very good student in school, always had been. The reason I got diagnosed was because for some reason my freshman year of high school, shit just went AWOL, and that was not like me. My academics had always been top tier, and I was always very just headstrong with my confidence in my own academics. So when I came to university and into a new system of marks, I was lost. And I spoke to my tutor, my personal tutor. I spoke to my advisor of studies at the university. Also was speaking to, like the admissions counselor who had helped me basically get in, and telling him my issues with academics at Queens. And he told me, he was like, they all sort of were like, register with disability services, Grace. Register with disability services. And I was like, no. I'm not disabled. I don't want to take that away from somebody who's like handicapped and they need like a ramp to get to certain places for their, like, I'm not that special. Like, not special in the way that special needs, but like special in the way that you need things from the university. You should be entitled to certain things. I was like, no, I'd survived all of high school with a learning disability and gotten myself into this university. So what is the need for being registered with disability services? But part of the thing that came with that was that it's easier to apply for extensions. So at the university, if you wanted to get an extension regularly, it's called exceptional circumstances. You have to fill out a form, you have to show proof, you have to get it signed by your advisor, your personal tutor, and all of that stuff. And it's like 3 or 4 pages of stuff to fill out. And with the ISSA that I have, which is what gives me flexible extensions, is that I don't have to fill up those forms. So all I have to do is email the school that I'm in, so School of HAP, History, Anthropology, Politics, and Philosophy, and email my lecturers or professors and just say, hey, yeah, this is not getting in on time. And that is a dangerous game. And each time I've come home after a semester, I've come home with essays still to do. And it has been a huge problem in the dynamics of the household because I still have these essays to hand in every time I come home because it's so flippin' easy for me to get an extension. So I guess that's like a juxtaposition to Alex's point about how it's either all or nothing in your case. For me, even if you handed in something late and you don't have an exceptional circumstances form, it's just 5% off your marks that are taken out a day.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And
Michael, go.
Whenever I have deadlines in my classes, I'm extremely flexible.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I mean, it inconveniences me a little bit for sure. Right. But
Do you grade them all at once too?
I try to grade things all at once because it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
You get that it's easier to compare.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's a little bit of an inconvenience to me when things are not like on time. But then on the other hand, I'm not good at doing things on time. And I feel like there are so many legitimate personal things going on with all of the individuals in my class that more often than not, the reason things are not getting done on time are not frivolous. Right? They're a student that maybe really needs an extension, but didn't ask for it for one reason or another. So anyway, I've always been like extremely open with stuff like that. And I think more common than not, I don't know what professors you had, Alec, but everyone I know is very free with giving extra time.
Well, I mean,
I think especially in the age of COVID right now, like it has definitely shifted
Well, yeah.
the need to be like understanding of people's circumstances in the
Of
home.
course.
Like,
well, and there's also, like one of the great skills of like becoming a contributing member to society. I mean, that seemed really intense, but is like having an intuitive feel for what has a strict due date and what does not have a strict due date. Right.
Yeah.
So like I applied for a grant in October through the NSF, like a big grant application. It was like 35 pages long. I had to do all of this stuff, write budgets and like all of this kind of stuff. Right. That due date is strict, right? It's the federal government, right? Your taxes, that due date is strict, right? The federal government. But like right now I'm reviewing a paper. Like part of my job is like I have to referee research papers to see if they're right and worthy of being published. So I'm refereeing a paper, Journal of Algebra, and that due date is not strict. Right? I mean, that's like on top of all of the rest of my work, right? So like it's secret what paper it's refereeing. Like I'm not allowed to release that information, right? I don't get like points on my resume for doing this kind of thing. I don't get paid for doing this kind of thing. So in my mind, this is less of a strict deadline.
Right. Well, and with that being said, right, like in the work that I'm doing right now, the stuff so like stories, right? Like, for example, I came in this morning, came into the office at 7:30. My first task for the day was writing up wrestling results from the Lakewood Classic. I had to think about a lot of factors, right? I first had to think about what I was going to write about based on what the results told me. Ended up just writing about a couple place finishers. One guy got first, yada, yada, yada. And I have to put some art with that. I have to put a photo with that. That's another part of my responsibility here, is to get kids' faces in the newspaper, get their names and faces in the newspaper. When it comes to the print version of our product, right, we have advertisers that pay to be on a specific page. So if we don't adequately give enough local content, that looks bad on us. Because and I've worked for publications in the past that say we're not going to advertise unless you do more local stuff. Like with Adams Publishing Group, that's a nationally owned, family company, the Adams family, not to be confused with, not to be confused with that Adams family, but they own several newspapers throughout the country. They don't really have a very local mindset, but here we do a little mixture of both, right? We share some stuff about Ohio State that goes into the Associated Press. We obviously do our local coverage, but I have to, when I get an assignment and I put my name down for that game or that story, I have to do it. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, in terms of like stories that, I guess I should also talk about this. Like, again, a lot of factors go into what a deadline is. Timeliness is one of them. That's like the biggest one. I can't save this wrestling recap for later in the week because it just happened this Saturday. It's old news at that point. People already know what's happening. People already got the scoop from someone else. So I'm competing with other people, right? This is a business. I have to think about that a lot of the time. But in terms of stories that aren't timeliness, I'm actually working on a story right now with a alumni from the University of Iowa. He played college football for the Hawkeyes, played offensive line. He's opening up what he's calling an O-line academy. O is OH for Ohio, obviously, and then line. Offensive line academy is what he's trying to do. And it's a dedicated facility meant specifically for big guys like me. So it's pretty nice to have that. But with that being said, their grand opening is this Saturday. It's not that timely of a story because they're going to be advertising with us anyway. This is kind of what newspapers do sometimes is if a new business comes up and they advertise, then we do a story on them. It's just kind of a quid pro quo. So we're all making money, right? That story is not going to be as needed as like our in-season coverage. So in college, I was kind of drilled that over and over again. Deadlines are deadlines are deadlines are deadlines for a reason. And people get fired over, not meeting a deadline. So the last thing that I want to do is to put my editor that I work for on the Marysville Journal Tribune side. I'm the editor for the Richwood Gazette. On his side, I have to make sure that he's good in terms of content, because if he's not, then that makes him look bad because of what I did. So it's all about being a team and relying on each other. And I guess it does contribute to a lot of toxic work productivity in that. And you see this all the time in journalism. People make sensational headlines. They don't know all the facts. They go with a lead and they just run with it. You see this all the time. And they don't really tell the honest truth. You see it more so in broadcast news where people just kind of cut corners. Other times there have been print journalists that just completely fabricate stories, or they steal people's work. Plagiarism happens all the time. That's kind of the death note in your career. If you do plagiarism, that's like, you're kind of blackballed from the industry at that point. But,
so do you feel the pressure to like write more or cover more events? Or
I've gotten the pressure when I first started here in Ohio to write longer. I didn't know what that meant, other than just get more detail. But there have been some events that I've gone to, and it's really easy to write down what happened. But when I was working for APG, I was writing 10 to 15 stories a week, like a lot. And I was also covering 3 markets at the time. So it was now that was toxic. I had a very toxic boss who, there were a few questionable things that she did in terms of like what she would cover, what she wouldn't cover, things that she would print versus not print, things that she would ask me to do that weren't necessarily good for me. Like, in Logan, I was covering sports, but in Perry and Pickaway, I was covering general news. So I would literally be in meetings all morning or all afternoon, and then go to a basketball game like later that day. So I'd probably be pulling like 12-hour days, probably 3-4 times a week when I was working with APG. And burnout, man, it really messed with my psyche. It messed with my, it was very just, I don't know. It was, my mind became a fog, but my self-confidence became less. And I think that's another part of being overworked, is that you feel as though your creativity side and your productive side take a hindrance, and that in turn makes you feel less about yourself. And that kind of leads into, you know, what we've experienced in our personal lives in terms of being less creative or whatever, right? So with that being said, I would pass this question off to you two. I don't care who takes it first, but have there been moments where you've been overworked and you've seen your creative side like take a dip? And like, what did that look like, and how did that make you feel? How did you overcome it as well?
Yeah. So academia is really bad for toxic productivity / overwork, because there's always more than you could do, right? Mm-hmm. There's always another research paper that you could write, and there's someone out there who is doing another research paper that like one more than you this year, or there's always like another innovative teaching method you could use, or there's more outreach that you could be doing. There's no upper limit to what you could do, and you could still be like not successful, right? So that's sort of why I suggested this topic, is that it feels like very close to my life experience, like in terms of my path through my job in academia. I've always felt like I could never do enough, and the more I didn't seem like I got anything out of it.
Can I ask you a question, Michael?
Yes.
About your kind of work and what you need to do. How much of your like writing or just stuff in general do you need to do like research for? Because I feel like research is a place where you can definitely get like lost in your mind about getting stuff done, because you're focusing so much about what other people have gotten done and what they've said. And
you mean like what percentage of my job is?
Yeah.
So I would say, I guess the party line would be like maybe 40% of my job would be like research type stuff, and then 60% would be other stuff. So, I mean, but to be honest, I've let that slip a little bit. I got tenure last year, whatever, this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And my years before tenure, I made sure I was like writing 3 new research papers a year or 2 new research papers a year or something, but that just like came to a head. And now like, I think I'll have a couple to submit this year, but it's mostly because they've been in the pipeline for a while, not because I've done anything that's like terribly new this year. But even now, I don't know if it's enough. You look around at other people in the field, at their CVs and what they're doing each year, and it's like just an impossible comparison. You never know if you're like the person that you found that you're comparing yourself with is the average or the outlier. And even now, like, I don't know if I'm the average or if I'm the outlier, or if I'm below average, right?
Well,
so
I think
there's just like no knowledge as to where I stand compared to everyone else.
Well, I think, from my angle, you're obviously you're highly productive. I wouldn't say you're overproductive, but you're very like highly efficient and productive at what you do, in terms of you're doing your classroom work as well as your YouTube work. But with Grace, like, that same question to you, what's been a creative hit that you've experienced recently, other than the fact that you've put off some papers in the past, you know? Does that do you feel you're more creative when you're given time to think about a topic, or is that just more of procrastination on your part?
Wait, say that again.
When you're feeling like you're overproductive, right, and you experience this burnout.
Oh, okay, I get what yeah. I think for me, it's like, so one of my essay questions is very broad. There's like a lot of different ways you could go at it. You can be very original, you know, it definitely gives you the room to have your own nuance and your own opinion, which I really respected because I hadn't really felt that from my university previously. But what I found because of that was that because there was such a wide range of what I could talk about, it made it even harder to zero in on something, because I was like, wait, this could be a good point. Wait, no, this could be a good point. Wait, how many different aspects of this problem can I, you know, like outline or present? Is that even possible? Should I, am I really going at it the way the professor wants me to, you know?
So it sounds like you
that
second
kind of
guess yourself a lot. You do like a lot of like second guessing of yourself.
Yeah, like. Definitely. Yeah. Because I want it to be like the best argument that it could be, but it's just not always.
Well, and I experience that sometimes with, I think I've written one philosophy.
I have a friend coming down, and I'm going to ask her if she wants to speak, if that's okay. Because I feel like it'd be nice to get another university student perspective.
Yes.
Okay, cool. She's just trying. That's why I keep looking out. She's trying to find where I am.
Okay. That'll be awesome.
Does she know what the situation is?
She knows that I'm doing a podcast, but you can just like, there she is. Okay.
Well, and before we let her speak, I wanted to touch on this because looking at our outline, and looking at
I'll mute myself.
And looking at the time that we have, I just want to make sure that we're on track. But when it comes to, you know, the grind, right? I feel like a lot of us, when we are in the midst of it, we feel as though we don't have the support system that we need in order to go through it. And one of the things that Michael and I talked about prior to us recording was the difference between overwork / productivity and privilege. And going back to my experience with guys who are entrepreneurs and in finance, you know, some were members of very affluent families who out of college could risk taking a few chances on their career. So with that, like, their version of the grind was different. I remember my first year out of college, I was starting out as a journalist, wanted to live on my own, had a roommate whose mother would give him groceries every week through Amazon. So he didn't really have to worry about food per se. For me, I had to do that on my own. And with that caveat, I wanted to get your guys' take. And we have a new voice here on the podcast that can maybe give us her take on the differences between overwork productivity, or rather the relationship between overwork productivity and privilege. So I guess I would extend that question off to y'all. What do you think the relationship between overwork productivity and privilege is?
Oh, that was a big question, Alec. Why don't you ask her what her name is first?
With that being, I mean, I just opened it up to everybody. So with that being said, let's introduce our new voice here. Tell us your name, tell us where you're from and what you are studying and where you go to school.
My God, I was really reeled into this.
She was. She had no idea.
No, I have no choice in this one. I'm being held. No, I'm joking. My name's Molly. I'm from Galway, so the Republic of Ireland.
Maybe. Oh, I know someone there.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah, he's a math person. He's in the math department at the university.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's all.
It's a really nice city. And I'm studying film studies. And
look at me like, you know,
film studies and production at at Queen's, same as Grace.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so well, to just like have her take on what this topic is, right? We're discussing toxic productivity. What have been your experiences with that? Have you ever overworked yourself, and have you ever felt the aftermath of maybe a burnout? And if so, like, did that have any effect on your productivity during those 2 points?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think because I do the academic side of film as well, and then I do the production side of it. So I think it's really hard to balance creativity with academics. So just there, I just directed and wrote a short film, and then
Yes, you did.
That's more than I've ever done. So there you go.
It's 40% of one module, and then I have 3 other essays that are worth a lot more, and it's tough to balance that out. Especially you're doing like 12-hour shoots, like ridiculous stuff like this.
Jeez.
And then you're supposed to just like write all these essays, and I suppose the career path I want to take is in production. Yet to get that career path, I still need to get the good grades, so it's definitely tough to figure out what you prioritize.
Yeah. Okay. So the next kind of subtopic in this discussion is the relationship between toxic productivity, overworking, and privilege. Are there fellow classmates of yours that maybe don't have the same sense of urgency that you have based on some sort of privilege that they may have by chance? Or what's your thoughts on that, relationship?
I don't want to overtalk you.
No, you're good.
Yeah, definitely. I think background is like a huge factor. Like our class as well, like especially with education, I know that like a lot of kids, young adults, walk into uni and it's all paid for, accommodations paid for, whereas at least for myself, like I'm not in a position to have my rent paid for and my daily living. So like I work a part-time job at the weekends, and I know like a lot of classmates would especially in film as well, because it's not a degree that you're guaranteed a career, right? Like my family are like, what are you studying again? That's a nice fun little hobby you've got.
Wow.
And I think a lot of probably classmates would be like, that's a fun little hobby, I've got this nice degree. Whereas for me, and for a lot of people, it's like, fuck, I've got to be like the top of my class to make this a career. Like I've got to be the best of the best. And that's like, sorry.
No, you're good.
Well, but
yeah, and I think it also, sorry, Alec.
Yeah, that's okay. Go.
I
go
think
for it.
on top of that, what at least I've experienced personally myself, and I'm gonna guess Molly has as well, is that, so I study philosophy of politics, she does film and production. To other people who do like medicine or STEM subjects, engineering, stuff like that, we have a fake degree. I'm graduating with a fake degree because we're not guaranteed like employment opportunities. Like it's not one of those degrees that's like, oh, if you study computer science, you can go straight into IT work. Right. Like there's not like a direct, like, or law, you'd go straight into practicing law, So I think that's also like, on top of actually having to probably like work harder for it, it's still sometimes seen as like just froofy and like, oh, you study film, that's so easy. Like, oh, you're like doing like an arts thing. It's humanities is nothing, that kind of stuff. So I think that's also like just a societal challenge.
Well, I'm sure that I'm sure you and your fellow classmate can both agree that, and I've been told this by a famous novelist, Robert Olmsted. He was one of my professors in college. He's written several novels that have turned into movies. He flat out said in class one time that writing is one of the most thankless professions in America, but I assume the world as well, because storytelling is kind of a lost art form, and it's never guaranteed that you're going to get the audience's attention. I mean, I don't know how many people read my stuff. I don't have a gauge for that because it's print, right?
Probably not a lot.
Probably not a lot, right? But at least in some form, I'm hoping that people look at my stuff and archive it, at least to some respect, to kind of tell the story of, say, an athlete or someone of interest that was involved in sports and whatnot. When I was in general news, I think more so historians or even filmmakers would look at news articles and stuff just to get an idea of how a culture was built or how a society functions. So I guess there's that, and for me, I wasn't guaranteed a media job out of college. So I had to kind of grind for that. But Michael, to move the question on to you, have you kind of seen that level of privilege and overproductivity kind of come together at some point? And what's your thoughts on that kind of relationship?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. So from my, personal experience in my professional life, I don't know that I have a good description, or I don't think I have a good example of this happening, but maybe what I'm thinking about mostly as toxic productivity, or maybe like overreaching with work and privilege, their relation is like a little bit complicated. So on the one hand, someone who's truly privileged that doesn't have to worry about money has the ability to completely pour themselves until they break into a creative project or maybe their own like side business project. So on the one hand, and they're probably going to be supported by their family or their social support system. So I guess on the one hand is that someone that comes from privilege has the privilege to put themselves into a situation where they're overworking themselves towards some sort of goal, but it's a goal that they chose. Whereas someone without privilege is almost forced into overwork that is not glamorous just to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so somewhere in the middle, obviously, coming from privilege is a huge advantage because you can choose whether or not to go into this situation. But I think there is something to be said for the privilege of being able to work yourself to the bone for a personal creative project. I think there's this interesting duality between these two topics.
There is. And this coincides with investigative reporting. When you have the financial backing of, say, like a publisher or a group of investors or whatever, however you get the funding through, you're able to comfortably dissect whatever story you're talking about. I mean, when I visited the Chicago Tribune back when I was a senior at Ohio Wesleyan, they talked about, one of the questions that was brought up is, so your editors just trust you to do this story, and what happens if the story doesn't come out with anything? Well, there's always a pitch, right, for stories. I'm going through it kind of right now with the story in mind. But you have to pitch that this is a story that you want to look into, and you might find something or you might not. Either way, you're still getting paid. The hope is that you find a trend, and whatever that trend is, you're going to report on it. I remember the topic of conversation when we were talking with the investigative reporters with that newspaper was the story that they were pitching had to do with a magnet that was a toy for infants or toddler. No, I'm sorry, it was for toddlers. But toddlers were mysteriously dying because they interacted with this magnet toy. Well, turns out through medical records research, through 6 to 8 months of investigative reporting and Freedom of Information Act requests, they found that there was a percentage of kids that were dying because they were ingesting the magnets, multiple parts of the magnet, and then the magnet was getting stuck in their intestines, and then through no fault of their own, it would rip holes in their stomach. So it's like that was a story that needed to be told. And the company that made the toy came out and like made a public statement. They recalled it. And so in that kind of a sense, the investment was gambled on perfectly, because they obviously didn't know what they were going to find through all of these freedom of information requests. Again, like I said, journalists are like the first draft of history. So who knows, like, if this story was ever added on after the fact, but that topic needed to be searched thoroughly, and they needed to do it with as little hands-on from the upper management or editorial staff as possible, so that they can just do their work. So again, when it comes to like, investigative reporting, the financial backing and the financial relief would definitely help benefit the reporting side of things, because you're not working 2 other jobs to finance yourself or finance this project, or both. So it's like, with that, that's how I would relate the two in terms of.
So kind of compared to someone who just writes for Substack or something and has their own personal subscribers on Substack, and they're trying to grow a personal following, like someone in that kind of situation might feel like they can't do enough.
Exactly.
Right. It's impossible to do too much because they don't have a guaranteed like revenue or like kind of upward vertical for something like that, versus somebody being in the more traditional media space.
Well, I mean, with that being said, there have been journalists who've utilized Substack and have made.
Yeah. I know, but I think they probably like took their notoriety from being well-known journalists in New York Times or something. Like, for example, I'm not trying to speak ill of you, but if you said tomorrow, I'm just going to make my living on Substack, how would that go? Right.
It would not go very well.
Yeah. But if like Ezra Klein did that, it'd be fine.
Yeah. That'd be fine.
Yes.
Or if someone like,
but I mean, not to say that you couldn't do that, but it'd be a grind. Right. And in order for you to take that grind on, you would have to have some sort of backup monetarily, right? You'd have to have some sort of backup, which would be a privilege, right?
Yeah, it would be.
Okay, Grace, go.
Sorry, Alec, I remember when you graduated college at Ohio Wesleyan, and you spent about 2.5 months at home. And a very common piece of advice that was offered to you, or not piece of advice, but prospect that was offered to you, was having, some of the connections that our mom has, sort of help you find employment in New York City.
Yeah.
And something that's said to me literally like every day. Find contacts. I'm even like, Grace is a friend. I'm like, yes.
No, I offer my mom's connections to.
No, you should do that. You should do that. That's what good friends do. Yes.
So, he's a legend as well. Yeah, exactly. No, but I remember, like, it was like, Alec, you want to be a journalist. You have this degree. You could go straight to the top if you really, really wanted to, more or less. Or at least you would have been able to start off at a like internship at a very, very high level. And you were like, no. Well, part of it was probably a little bit of non-confidence in yourself. I'm not.
But okay.
Maybe a little bit was not having as much confidence in yourself, but also that going straight to that. So let's say you would have taken an internship in New York City, right?
Right.
What would you have done? Would it have been paid? Maybe not. If it was, that would have been nice. Would it have been enough of a living wage for you to buy your own apartment in New York City? Probably not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Would you probably still be living with mom and dad?
Absolutely.
Yes. Would that take away some of your other creative, like freedom of movement? Probably.
But that is also
the smarter option for you.
I heard about
that
this,
is also
and I think it was like at Rolling Stone or something.
Yeah. So to kind of,
which seems like a good trade.
I mean, well, like, here's the thing, right? Like, okay, so I took an internship with a television broadcast company out in Seattle. Tegna Corporation was the company that owned King 5 Television News. Mom had a connection through there. I interviewed for 5 hours one day with like 5 different people. It was a very interesting experience that I always look back on fondly. What was told to me there, I got the internship, right? There was only 5 interns, about over 150 applicants, but I was able to get 1 out of 5 spots. The thing on my side that was told to me was that as an intern, I'm not going to get a job at King 5. There's just no chance, because it's a top 15 market. They look for experienced journalists to come in. And at that point, Steve Bunin, who's I believe still an anchor there, he was an anchor and a reporter for ESPN. So he already had reputation coming into it. In journalism, it's a little different, right? Would that internship at Rolling Stone help me? Absolutely. Would I get a job with Rolling Stone after the fact? Absolutely not. And I believe that like 100%, because here's the thing. Even though I have a degree, I don't know a whole lot. And I mean that in a very...
Oh, I know how it goes. Like, when I first got a PhD, I didn't know anything, right? It's taken me like nearly 10 years that I feel like a mathematician now who like knows math, right? It took a long time. Like, yeah, getting a degree doesn't mean you know anything. It just means that you like took some classes.
Exactly. And I don't believe that I would be extended that.
What are we doing here, Molly?
I wouldn't be given
Molly,
that.
I think we should drop out.
But with that being said, right, like I also did an informational interview with CBS News because I thought of kind of pursuing a career as a camera operator and then kind of moving from there in front of the camera at some point. What was told to me at CBS by a man named Klaus, forgot his last name, but he was probably one of the biggest camera operators I've ever seen. He played Division I football for the Syracuse Orange, played defensive line. So I was there for NFL Sunday, and I was in front of all of these former NFL players and coaches. And what he told me about that job specifically, and specifically about CBS, is that CBS stands for 3 words: cousins, brothers, and sisters. Unless you're one of those 3, you're not getting hired. So that's a form of privilege there.
Yeah, and
it's a very
something
family.
Else too that I thought about when growing up and figuring out what do I want to study in school and stuff. And when I was 10, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be in the theater. I had my little phase of wanting to be a child actor where I tried to do those open audition calls and shit. I was like, right. And I'm going to do acting classes. I'm going to do dance classes. I'm going to be a child actor and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And what I've always known, and this is a privilege itself, is that when mom's friends come up to me and it's like, oh, what do you want to do? Did you want to do theater and stuff? And I was like, no, not necessarily, because I know that that's something I can always fall back on. Right. Theater is something that I'll always have in my back pocket, that I will have those connections personally too. They may be mom's work friends, but I've built my own relationships with them that would offer me, a foot in the door in that way.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
because oh, sorry.
No, you could spoke first.
You could probably convince your mom to co-produce a show with you in 5 years.
Yeah. Damn.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting because my mum would have done theater and English in university, and she would have worked for big companies like Jim Henson and stuff that did the Muppets, and all that would have crashed. And then the second we moved over from England to Ireland, all those opportunities were lost, but she still has those contacts. And growing up, film and theater was something that I was like, this is not a career. I've seen my mum fail at it. This is not something I want to do. It's not going to work. I'm going to become a nurse or a teacher, or I think I wanted to be a doctor at one point. With what academic skills, I don't know. But it is interesting to see that was something you saw as well, almost to fall back on. And then here we are doing arts degrees, and suddenly there's all this pressure. But maybe that's a privilege in itself, having the self-awareness of failure.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure.
And not being
Yeah, like-
afraid of it. I think that's my thing. I'm really, at least in university now, like I had mentioned before, I was very like strong academic student in high school and stuff. But then once it came to university, I actually kind of stopped caring because I realized how much this degree did not mean. And I realized how much it doesn't mean towards like my self-security. I was like, I really don't. No, it does need to mean something, but but it's a problem how much I know that it does not validate my self-confidence and my self-worth, that I don't have the drive to have that toxic productivity.
Well, and like a failure in your life not being devastating. I mean, that's like a huge privilege, right?
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think having to become like an adult as well, you like learn that very quickly when everything seems to go wrong. You can't get a doctor's appointment, or there's like £10 or dollars.
Your heating's broken.
Yeah, your heating's broken. And then you're like, actually, everything will just sort itself out. Not entirely. Like, I'm sure you do things towards it, and you put things in the universe and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't matter. It's gonna work out.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a difficult thing to learn that I'm not 100% sure if I've learned yet.
Yeah, my heating was broken last week, guys, and it was like 40 degrees here. How much is that in Celsius?
I have no clue.
What was the weather?
Yeah.
What was the weather like?
It was like probably like 5
degrees.
Celsius.
Okay, so we're gonna take that as the conversion. But my heating broke. Okay, and my flatmate left because she had to do this surgery thing, which is totally fair. But she didn't sort it out before she left, which again, totally fair. She didn't have to worry about the heating being on. But I was like, I had a day where I didn't do anything about it. And I was like, fuck it. The heating's broken. It's just how it is right now. It's going to be really cold when I go to sleep tonight.
I think
and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to sleep here tonight. I'm going to sleep somewhere else tonight.
I would
And
say
then
that
I'll
Grace
call my
did this
landlord.
for about 4 to 5 days before calling her landlord. That was actually a situation that she could have solved quite a bit quicker. So
It's more like
yeah.
Okay.
And also like,
But lo and
I
behold,
mean,
it was fixed.
we rented out a house once, and like the landlord
Michael, I can't
wants you
hear
to
you.
call. You can't hear me at all.
You need to connect it on remember your phone.
Oh, what about now?
I don't think so because it's on here.
Is it not on the phone anymore? Oh,
I'm
it
gonna
says
join
that
back in the FaceTime
Yeah.
call.
I think you unjoined or something.
It's just because there we go. Okay, now you can speak. Or Michael, you have
Okay.
to join the FaceTime call. There we go. Yeah.
Okay. So wait, what was I? Oh yeah. The landlord wants you to call for stuff like that because it could get worse, and then they have to pay more money, and they're pissed.
Well, Grace, and I was going to say this, when you have that situation, the probability of a pipe being frozen and then bursting is going to cause way more headache than having no heat on will ever fix. So I would say try to get that solved. But
I did get it solved. Okay, guys.
So
Okay.
Got it solved all by myself.
She got it solved.
We're proud of you.
Okay, so to kind of round things out, I got to get back to work here at the office, but some media recommendations. I have put down one. Goalcast has been one that I've used to kind of help me stay in a constant, let's just say consistent level of work versus leisure versus planning ahead, right? I think those are three facets that we can all agree with that are very important to the professional aspect of things. But I don't know what other types of media are out there to kind of help with this sort of level. I think a piece of advice that I would give to everybody is, guys like Gary Vee, right? He's a very well-known social media influencer that has taken Instagram really by storm. I see a lot of his stuff, and I'm also following him. But before I started following him, I would always see like quotes from him about, embrace the grind, do stuff on your own, take chances. Some of us don't have that privilege. Some of us don't have those options. So take things that people like Gary Vee says with a grain of salt, and understand that you are unique in your own world and your own situation. Things are translatable. You can get advice from anywhere, but you also have to really do some self-reflection before you carry out any goal or before you start that overworking process. But Michael, what would be a media recommendation for you?
Okay, so I think maybe a good recommendation based on our discussion today would be this YouTuber called Cather Out. So I put her link in our chat. We can maybe put that somewhere.
Mhm.
She started off like being a productivity like grade YouTuber, so like how to get all A's at USC or whatever. But now she's like slowly translated herself into kind of leftist thinking and anti-capitalism and the evils of overwork and productivity. And so I think she has like a really interesting story through this whole landscape and tells really good stories related to what we've done today.
Grace, what would be your side of things here?
What?
What
Did
would
you say
be
my name? Sorry, you cut out.
what
Yeah,
would be
Garce.
what would Garce? What would be your media recommendation for someone who is trying to understand the how do you call it, the positive side of overwork or productivity? You know what I mean? How to keep a consistent level that's positive. Anyone that you view that kind of helps you go through that?
You done? Yeah. There's this YouTuber called Rowena space Sao. I think that's her last name. But she just basically like talks about shows how productive she is, but then a couple weeks later, you see her trying to regain her productivity because she overworked herself. I just feel like she's a very real representation of that dichotomy that can exist within one person. You can be like super productive at one point and really doing everything you need to do, but then totally burn out and for weeks on end trying to pick up your own pieces as they fall to the ground, you know? And she's also based in New York City right now, which is why I started watching her over COVID and quarantine. And yeah, she also talks about like mindfulness, and she has her own like spirituality that you see her come in and out of relationships with. And you see that when she leaves that relationship with her spirituality and practicing and stuff, that she tends to get overly
Ambitious.
lost as a person. Not overly ambitious, but just lost, and sort of everything's kind of, foggy for her. So I thought that was an interesting like thing, because you have to pay attention to yourself and your mind and your body, and that's a way that you could do that.
Right. Well, and
Alec, why don't you share your media recommendation, and then Molly will share hers.
Yeah, Alec definitely started, and his recommendation was first.
Yeah.
So you missed that, Grace.
Yeah, I missed that.
Cool.
So yes, let's turn the question over to our guest here. So what would be your media recommendation for, having a consistent level of productivity that is good health-wise and perspective-wise?
Yeah, 100%. I would probably recommend, sorry, Grace is putting me, it's very distracting actually. So there's this guy, he's from Limerick. So I don't know, would you guys really struggle to understand the accent because it's very thick, but so it's the Blind Boy podcast, if anyone's interested. He used to be in this band called the Rubber Bandits, which like a lot of Irish people would know, and they were just absolute jokers. But he's actually this really insightful man who touches on everything from kind of Irish history and culture, like going way back to all these mythologies and where they came from and how that represents us as people, to talking about like the psychology of societies, and then touching base on anxiousness. And he actually talks a lot about the work-life balance in within media, because he would struggle. So RT and TG Cahir would be our main television platforms, and he kind of openly talks about how little money there is in that industry within Ireland, and having to emigrate to get that like funding, and what that then means, what kind of gets censored because of this, and then what that means as an Irish person maybe wanting to create Irish media but not having the voice too. And he touches on so many things. He also writes fiction, which is like amazing, and it's just a really interesting perspective, especially from someone who, I'd say he's anonymous as well, so he wears a bin bag on his head, but he's really famous.
A garbage bag for those American viewers.
And he talks about that anonymity as well, and why that was so important to him to keep, and why it was so important, but also how that's hindered him to become famous. But it's really, I feel like I'm on a ramble now. I'm sorry.
Well, no. I mean, you touched upon a lot. That's definitely something that we will definitely take a look at. So just to kind of round things out, I don't really know how to make a closer to this, but we've heard a lot today about toxic productivity, about what to do with it, what it looks like, what it's like with privilege, or with those that have privilege, what that kind of looks like as well. And is there anything else that anyone wants to add to the topic before we kind of end this episode here?
See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for having me. This was really interesting. I wasn't too sure what it was about, but it was fun.
Thank you for coming on. It's again, not to single you out or anything, but the accent definitely is a change of pace from everyone that's a part of this podcast. So it was interesting to get a new voice and a new perspective that is not from our neck of the woods. So that is definitely a privilege for us to have. And we thank you for joining. Thank you, Grace, for having her on the podcast. Michael, anything that you would like to say to the audience before we close out here?
No, I think we're good.
We're good. Okay. With that being said, my name is Alexei Pavlov. I'm joined here by Grace Pavloff, Michael Penn, and our guest. What's the full name? What's your full name?
Molly.
We can't hear you.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
What's your full
Alec,
name,
we
Molly?
specifically can't hear you. We can
Grace
hear
told
Michael.
me that I had to wait until you just waved goodbye.
I didn't wait.
Michael,
Okay. This is good. This is a good end, right?
This is a good end. Okay.
Just
so
sort of like trails off into nothingness.
trails off into nothingness. I will try to
Grace that you-
That's good.
something,
Alec, I can't hear
re-record
you.
something.
Yeah.
Can you
So,
not hear me? Hello?
This woman, Rowena Tsai,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
great. She, me and her have the same number of total views on YouTube.
Wait, connect to this. Connect.
Grace, I'm
We
still
both-
on.
We lost the audio.
Do you hear me? No.
Okay. All right, because I'm still on here with Michael. All right, so I'm gonna probably re-record this closer, but with that being said, everyone, I got to get back to work. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. We appreciate your viewership, and if you would like to listen to more, make sure to subscribe and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, along with our YouTube channel. Make sure you also follow Michael Penn and his personal channel if you dare to master arithmetic, or in my case, really hard math. Be well, stay safe, and we will see you next time. Next time. Next time. Next time. Next time. Next time.